What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Gonna have my game preview up for you guys probably tomorrow. I'm just kind of waiting until we get all the updated injury reports for both the New York Giants and the Tennessee Titans, but already been working on that, been working on some of the notes for the video. Really looking forward for the start of the regular season, as I know a lot of you guys are as well. I'll be live throughout the week. I know Friday, Bad Dog is going to come on the channel for the Talkin Giants show. Saturday, of course, the night before stream. And who knows, I may surprise you guys with a midweek live stream as well, leading up into week one against the Tennessee Titans, being that I know a lot of you guys are going to be excited. I know that, a lot of you are going in with moderate expectations this year, as you should. The Giants are a rebuilding football team, but at least for me as an individual, I always get excited when football comes around. We finally have something to watch on Sundays. Hopefully, it's a better product. I don't expect it to be a Super Bowl product. I don't expect it to be a playoff product. I hope it's a more entertaining product that is showing progress over the course of the year. But that remains to be seen under rookie head coach Brian Daboll. But really excited, nevertheless. But in this video, we're going to talk about the big news that came out this morning regarding the New York Giants and their salary cap. And we'll get into all the specifics. But essentially, the Giants decided to backload some of Leonard Williams' contract in order to get under the salary cap. Had Joe Schoen not done that, we wouldn't have been able to play an NFL season. So the Giants did what they had to do in order to do that. Could they have done other things along the way? Perhaps. They could have cut Darius Slayton. I know a lot of people have talked about that. That wouldn't have got them under the cap. It was negative $6.6 million going into it. It would have saved them about $2 million. But Schoen elected to go this route. And he really had no choice, the fact of the matter. What got the New York Giants in this situation? I see people ask me that all the time on Twitter. Well, going into last year, the Giants' cap was actually not that bad. They had spent pretty wisely in terms of free agency, in terms of short-term contracts, 3-year deals, with James Bradberry and Blake Martinez being the two biggest, with the ability to get it after 2 years. The problem is, last year, the New York Giants went all in off a 6-win season in which they nearly made the playoffs in a horrible NFC East when Dak went down and everybody else went down, and we had the benefit of playing a lot of teams without their quarterbacks that year. If you remember, Joe Burrow did not play when we played the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Giants tried to evaluate their quarterback in Daniel Jones. So I understood why they spent where they did to try to evaluate Jones while he was still on the rookie deal, but it backfired big time, especially when you factor in the fact that it happened during the pandemic. So the cap, which traditionally goes up by 10 to 12%, went down by, I'm going to say, about 10%. So it was a 20% difference. And the Giants, in a year like that, elected to spend like crazy, signing guys like Kenny Golladay, signing guys like Adoree Jackson, and re-signing guys like Leonard Williams. And in order to do that, not only did they have to give them big money and backload those contracts, they had to backload contracts on the current roster in order to fit them in. If you remember, Logan Ryan restructured his contract. James Bradberry restructured his contract. I think Blake Martinez restructured his contract. So not only did they backload the incoming salaries, they backloaded the current salaries that were already on the roster, which this year now is why Joe Schoen inherited an absolute disaster of a cap situation. It's why we've lost James Bradberry. It's now why they had to do what they did today, backloading Leonard Williams. They also had to backload a bit of Adoree Jackson's contract. It's not the end of the world for the future cap space. We'll get into all that in this video. But what I'll tell you is don't expect the New York Giants next year. I see a lot of people on Twitter, content creators, talking about it. The Giants are going to have all this cap space next year. Don't expect the New York Giants to go out there and spend. They're just not. They're not going to go out there and spend like lunatics. Spending like lunatics is what got the New York Giants in this situation in the first place. Now, I'm not saying don't go out and spend it all. You need to fill some needs on your team, but you need to do it in a cost-effective manner. You need to think short-term in free agency. You need to think long-term in the draft. The Giants need to spend the majority of their cap space, if they're a successful organization, on retaining the players that they drafted. That's what the best teams do. They're forward-thinking. So, for instance, if Andrew Thomas has a really good year this year and he remains on the field, you obviously identify a premium left tackle as a long-term piece of your football team. Don't you think it would be smarter to extend him next year as opposed to waiting until 2025 when the market increases by 20% and get him at a discount? I think so, especially being that he's a long-term piece. Xavier McKinney is a bit more questionable, being that he plays the safety position, but he also is an option to extend at the end of the year. Yeah, it may suck that you don't get your shiny pieces in 2023 free agency, but you have to be long-term thinking. You have to start to commit to the guys that you think are going to be a long-term part of this team at a young age, guys like Andrew Thomas and guys like Xavier McKinney. So while I expect the New York Giants to fill some vacancy next year in free agency, because they're going to need to, whether it be cornerback, middle linebacker, interior offensive line, I don't expect them to have record-breaking contracts like they've done in the past when they signed Nate Solder, when they signed Kenny Golladay, when they re-signed Leonard Williams, Adoree Jackson. I don't expect 5-year commitments, 4-year commitments. I just don't. And you can even go back further than that, 2016, when we went out there and spent like lunatics, bringing guys like Olivier Vernon, Snacks Harrison, Janoris Jenkins, and it solved the problem for 1 year, but it obviously hurt the long-term stability of this New York Giants franchise. The fact of the matter is the majority of the good teams in the NFL use their cap space to retain their good draft picks. The bad teams in the NFL use their cap space to fix the poor drafts that they had. Period. End of story. The bad teams have more cap space for the simple reason they don't have the opportunity to spend the money on the players that they drafted because they weren't good, and they go off and hit free agency. Look at the New York Giants. That's what has happened. As far as the Leonard Williams contract goes and how it affects future cap space, let's dive into it. First things first, this coming out from Field Yates. The Giants have converted $17.88 million of defensive lineman's Leonard Williams' base salary into a signing bonus while adding a void year, creating $11.92 million in 2022 cap space. This according to Spotrac in terms of how it impacts future cap space for the New York Giants. Before this, I don't remember what his exact cap hit was for 2023. I think it was $26 million. So this adds $6 million to that. And it also affects the dead cap hit. We'll get into that in a second. But for 2022, he now only has a cap hit of $15.38 million. Before this, it was $12 million more than that. So it was about $27 million. Now it's 15.3. This now gives the Giants a bit more cap wiggle room. We'll get into all the specifics with that as well for this year's cap, but don't expect the New York Giants to go out there and spend a lot of players. They're going to need money for in-season moves if players go down with injuries, things of that nature. So, and they still don't have a ton. As far as next year, if you look at this in 2023, he now goes $32.26 million against the cap and carries a dead cap hit of $20.2 million. So essentially, if Leonard Williams were to get hurt, you still could cut him. It would save you $12 million. But before this decision, it would have saved you $18 million. And I think he only would have been about an $8 million dead cap hit. I think he was $26 million against the cap. So that dead cap hit went up by $12 million. Essentially, the $12 million that you saved on this cap now becomes the dead cap hit for 2023. And on top of that, if he plays out the totality of the 2023 season and is not re-signed, he will go $6 million against the cap in a voidable year. I'm pretty sure that voidable year, if they were to cut him in 2023, would no longer exist. It would all just go against the 2023 cap. I don't know that for sure. But what this signifies for me is they have identified Leonard Williams as a piece that they're probably intending to keep on this football team next year. Otherwise, you wouldn't have backloaded the contract to the point where it would have cost you $12 million more to cut him next year. It is entirely possible, and that cap hit is insane. It's near quarterback money in today's market, but it's entirely possible that Joe Schoen, if Leonard Williams has a very good year, stays healthy, may extend him and disperse the money differently so it doesn't go $32 million against the cap. Say you give him a 3 or 4 year extension, he's still relatively young. You could disperse the money that way. But that's something to talk about in the offseason. The Giants are going to have a lot of decisions to make, whether it be Leonard Williams, Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, several other pending free agents on this roster. But that's how it breaks down. I think this more than likely assures that Leonard Williams will remain a New York Giant in 2023. And the reason that the New York Giants did it is obvious. They need to get under the cap. They had a horrible cap situation. In terms of the future cap, we'll jump into that right after this. This is the cap space for this year before this move. If you look down in the bottom right here, it was negative $6.6 million. So according to Yates, we saved roughly about $12 million, which would mean our current cap space after that, if Spotrac is accurate, is a little bit over $5 million, about $5.3, $5.4 million after this move. What does that allow the Giants to do? I mean, I suppose they could pick up a player here or a player there on league min contracts, but I think the majority of this money will transfer over into the regular season to potentially, sign players in season if the Giants see fit. There's always going to be injuries that go down. In terms of next year's cap space, this was the cap space before this restructure. Okay. I think it's about $6 or $7 million against next year's cap than it was before. So they had $55.4 million according to Spotrac before this move. Now subtract $6 or $7 million from that. You're talking $48 million. And fans will look at next year's cap and say, well, if you cut Leonard Williams, you could save 12 here. If you cut this guy, you could save 7 here. And that's all well and good. But in my opinion, I think the fact that they committed another $12 million essentially to next year's roster to keep Leonard Williams here, I think he's going to be back with the New York Giants. Don't expect that. And the majority of that $48 million or so, if it's not used on guys like Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, which is still entirely possible, expect it to be used, the majority of it at least, to be used to retain players like Andrew Thomas, if he stays healthy, like I talked about at the top of this video. But those will be decisions that Joe Schoen will have to make at the end of the year. I think he still has a long-term approach. He's not looking to fix this team within 1 or 2 years. He's looking to build this team to be a sustainable contender. In order to do that, the best way possible to be sustainable is to build through the draft. Yes, free agency is important, but you need to get production out of those free agent acquisitions while still bringing them in on cost-effective contracts. And last year, the New York Giants, quite frankly, just did not do it. Whether it be the Logan Ryan extension, whether it be the 3 players I just talked about, and the backloading of contracts to go along with it, it was a complete disaster, and it set the New York Giants cap situation back a year, and now they're making up for it by backloading more contracts in order to get under the cap this year, which will affect future cap years. It's not the end of the world. The cap goes up every year, but expect Joe Schoen to be diligent next year and the year after that in free agency and not go on spending sprees. The bottom line, guys, if we're going to get out of this, the New York Giants are going to have to set the foundation and hit on their draft picks. Is free agency important to the process? Absolutely. You go back to the New York Giants Super Bowl in 2007, they had a variety of free agents that came in and put that team over the top. Plaxico Burress, Antonio Pierce, you could name a few more. Antrell Roll the second time around. But they had pieces in place. They drafted well leading up to that. Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan. I could go down the list. Eli Manning, right? Core pieces in place. Hakeem Nicks, Victor Cruz, even though he was an undrafted free agent, was not signed to a massive contract. They had core pieces in place at an affordable rate and used a couple of pieces on, in free agency to put that team over the top. The Giants have to get in that situation first before they start spending top dollar in free agency. That's at least my outlook on the team. The Leonard Williams thing, it is what it is. I mean, at this point, I kind of expected it when I saw the cap number and knew that he was really the only contract that they could do this with that was making a good amount of money long term. The other one would be Kenny Golladay, but I don't think New York Giants fans would have been clamoring to extend Kenny Golladay or, at least backload the contract, further committing more to Golladay for future seasons. I think the New York Giants at the end of the year, unless Golladay has a big season, will look to get out of that contract. But we'll see how it all plays out this year. Looking forward to talking more New York Giants football with you guys this year. But for now, Leonard Williams looks as if he'll definitely be a New York Giant in 2023. I kind of expected that before this. This only cements it further. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up.